Okay, well, I'm Sherilyn Stevens. I'm your host for the Racial Healing, Justice, and Unity series, a Baha'i-inspired series. And we're just delighted that so many of you registered today. You've kept me busy this afternoon sending you the link. So thanks for joining us, those of you that came through Oneness Chat or Partners for Racial Justice. And to our returning participants and guests, thank you again. It's so good to see so many of you. And to new friends and old, you can take that in terms of age or how long you've been with the series. Either way you want, we're just delighted that you're all here. I'm sorry I can't call out everyone that I see, but just know that we're just so delighted to be in this space with you again this evening. We're going to go ahead and get started. Just a few words as usual, or for those of you who are here with us for the first time, the chat is going to be turned off when our presenter starts. So if you want to do any chatting now, you can do that. After that, your comments will be sent to Nason or myself, and I will be moderating after Dr. Mahmoudi has done her presentation. She's very much looking forward to your questions and your comments. She'll take those after her presentation. And how we start our series here after this welcoming and gratitudes, I must not forget to do. We'll have a short devotion, and then we'll go right into our speaker's presentation and her formal introduction. So let me say the gratitudes that we have. I like to do them first because they're important. And if you wait till the end, you often forget. So first, I'd like to thank all of you that have made it out this evening and put some time aside to be here with us. Without you being here, this wouldn't be very worthwhile. Secondly, I'd also like to thank the team here, and that's Nason and Jillian Sturdivant. Can you guys wave or something there so they can see you? They do all our tech support. They've given us this huge Zoom platform, and they just make everything work. And also, I'd like to thank Sharon Nesbitt Davis. She is now doing all of our devotionals. So thank you so much, Sharon, for what you put together this evening. We appreciate it, and we appreciate all of you. And of course, last but not least, Dr. Hoda Mahmoudi, our presenter this evening. So we're very grateful that she's taken this time to be here with us and to educate us, inform us, and perhaps even challenge us in our thoughts, our views, or our actions about the interconnectedness of race, environmental justice, and world peace. So having said that, we'll go into our acknowledgements. Jillian, can we have the first slide? Something that we like to do here at the series is to acknowledge our Indigenous brothers and sisters. Why do we do this? Because number one, they still exist. Believe it or not, many people think Native Americans no longer exist. They have continued to watch over and nourish and cherish the land on which we live. And this is land which was stolen from them. It's unceded territory. And we have the benefit of living and breathing on it, regardless of how we arrived here. So we want to acknowledge their stewardship of the environment, really, not just this land. So if you happen to know what your Indigenous territory is, where you reside, and you'd like to share that in the chat, please do so. That's always of interest. And if you tell us, what town or city or state you're in that corresponds with that, that helps us educate ourselves a little bit too about the breadth of our American Indian brothers and sisters. We used to have a phone number for that. Those phone numbers have changed to this website that Nason has put in the chat. So if you'd like to go to that website, you can put in your zip code or something, and it will tell you what Indigenous tribe or tribes occupied the land where you reside. And you might want to keep that for future reference. and share that with others that you know as a form of gratitude and acknowledgement. Okay, thank you, Jillian. We'll go on to our next slide, please. Thank you. Here we're acknowledging notable Baha'i ancestors who stood up for racial justice. And reading from the left to the right, Sadie Oglesby, Robert Turner, Enoch Olinga, Dr. Magdalene Carney, Elaine Locke, Dorothy Baker, Ellsworth Blackwell, Agnes Parsons, William Sears, Pauline and Joseph Hanna, Louis Gregory, Elsie Austin, Rahia Canoe, Robert Hayden, and two central figures of our faith, Abdul Baha and his grandson, Shoghi Effendi. Could we have the music, please?
Why so afraid to stand up? Someone will tell you, sit down. But here is the truth, someone will always tell you, sit down. The ones we remember kept standing.
Thank you. Now, before we go into our short devotional program, I just want to explain why we play that brief clip, because it's important. Everyone in this room, by virtue of you being here, you're standing for racial justice. This might be your very first action, your very first attempt to perhaps educate yourself further on the issue. Or maybe you're more seasoned and you've been in this fight for a long time. Maybe for many of us, it's your lived experience as well. But the point is that you stood up, you showed up, and you came here. So thank you. This is an important action. And God willing, we will all have many, many other steps on this thorny path to justice. So with that, we'd like to go ahead into our devotional program. And I would like to invite, if someone would raise their hand, I'd like to invite someone to do the first reading, please. Alfred, would you? Thank you, Alfred. Jillian, we can go to the first slide, please.
O Son of Spirit, the best beloved of all things in my sight is justice. Turn not away therefrom if thou desirest me, and neglect it not that I may confide in thee. By its aid thou shalt see with thine own eyes, and not through the eyes of others, and shalt know of thine own knowledge, and not through the knowledge of thy neighbor. Ponder this in thy heart, how it behooveth thee to be. Verily justice is my gift to thee, and the sign of my loving kindness. Set it then before thine eyes.
Where is she? Come on back, peaceful.
Whoa, easy now.
I'm gonna be free or die.
I've been walking with my face turned to the sun. Weight on my shoulders, a bullet in my gun. Oh, I got eyes in the back of my head, just in case I have to run. I do what I can when I can, while I can for my people. While the clouds roll back and the stars fill the night, that's when I'm gonna stand up, take my people with
100 miles to freedom? Would you like to pick a new name to mark your freedom?
Paradigm.
Early in the morning, before the sun begins to shine, we're gonna start moving towards that separating line. I'm wading through muddy waters. You know I got a made up mind, and I don't mind if I lose any blood on the way to salvation. And I'll fight with the strength that I got until I die. So I'm gonna stand up, take my people with me. Together we are going to a brand new home, far across the river. And you hear freedom calling, calling me to answer. Gonna keep on keeping on.
Harriet, welcome to the Underground Railroad.
And I know what's around the bend might be hard to face 'cause I'm alone, and I just might fail, but Lord knows I'll try. Shine stars fit up the sky. Stand up, take my people with me. Together we are going to a brand new home, far across the river. Can you hear freedom calling, calling me to answer? Gonna keep on keeping on. I'm gonna stand up, take my people with me. Together we are going to a brand new home, far across the river. Do you hear freedom calling, calling me to answer? Gonna keep on keeping on. I'm gonna stand up, take my people with me. Together we are going to a brand new home, far across the river. I hear freedom calling, calling me to answer. Gonna keep on keeping on. I can feel it in my bones. I go to prepare a place for you. I go to prepare a place for you. I go to prepare a place for you. I go to prepare a place for you.
Peace cannot be kept by force. It can only be achieved by understanding. Albert Einstein.
Not one of us can rest, be happy, be at home, be at peace with ourselves until we end hatred and division. John Lewis.
Thank you. It isn't enough to talk about peace. One must believe in it. And it isn't enough to believe in it. One must work at it. Eleanor Roosevelt.
Listen, listen, while the storm in your heart is raging. Listen, listen, listen. Listen, listen to the echoes of martyrs praying. Listen, and sisters, listen, listen, listen. I swear we'll never find a way to where we're going all alone. Don't take your eyes off the road. Can you hear the bells ring out? Speak now, speak now. Can you hear the angels sing loud? Speak now, speak now. Listen, listen to the message of hope and the whispers of ghosts. Listen, listen, listen. For the children will grow on the seeds that we sow. They listen, they listen. Oh, listen. Brothers and sisters, listen, listen. I swear we'll never find a way to where we're going all alone. Don't take your eyes off the road. Can you hear the bells ring out? Speak now, speak now. Can you hear the angels cry out? Speak now, speak now. Don't you hold your tongue. Speak now, speak now, speak now. Oh, can you hear the angels? Speak now, speak now.
Thank you, friends. And thank you for those who read on the spot. We appreciate it very, very much. Most grateful for that. The thing I like about those two songs and about the notable Baha'i ancestors and others, of course, everyone has ancestors who have stood up for justice. But what I like about them is what they emphasize: standing up, be present. And in the Linda Evo song, again, it's stand up, but I'm taking you to a brand new home. And Dr. Mahmoudi is going to tell us what that brand new home looks like and discuss the path that can take us there. That brand new home of world peace. And the last song, although it's called Speak Now or Listen, it tells us to speak now. And that's what we need to do. We need to speak up in whatever arenas or forums we're comfortable in. But it's very important that we do this. So without further ado, let me formally introduce Dr. Hoda Mahmoudi. As indicated in the email that went out, she is the Baha'i Chair for World Peace, which is an endowment at the University of Maryland College Park for several decades now, and she's transformed that into a phenomenal resource on a variety of justice issues. As the director for that academic program, She collaborates with a wide range of scholars, researchers, and practitioners to advance interdisciplinary analysis and open discourse on global peace. Before joining the University of Maryland faculty, she served as the coordinator for the research department at the Baha'i World Centre in Haifa, Israel. And prior to that, Dr. Mahmoudi was Dean of the College of Arts and Sciences at Northeastern Illinois University, where she was also a faculty member in the Department of Sociology. Professor Mahmoudi is co-author of A World Without War. She's co-editor of Infrastructure, Well-Being, and the Measurement of Happiness, co-editor of Fundamental Challenges to Peace and Security, The Future of Humanity, and co-editor of Systemic Racism in America, Sociological Theory, Education Inequality, and Social Change. She also is co-editor of Interdisciplinary Perspectives on Human Dignity and Human Rights, of The Changing Ethos of Human Rights, and of Children in Globalization, Multidisciplinary Perspectives. What a body of work and knowledge that she has available to share with us today. And with that, I'm just delighted and would like to turn this over to Dr. Hoda Mahmoudi. Thank you for coming and being with us this evening.
Thank you so much, Sherilyn. I really appreciate your inviting me to this wonderful program which you host with such important topics. And I would like to really appreciate the work that you do, because as you said in your introductions, we all need to take action. We all need to be engaged and stand up, especially when it comes to the issue of racial justice, and of course, to the topic we're going to talk about in relation to race, which is environmental justice, and of course, the promotion of peace. I'm delighted to be with all of you tonight, and thank you for giving me this opportunity to be a part of this very important endeavor. So in this presentation, I would like to examine the current situation in our country, but also in the world, in relation to environmental justice and racial justice. Then I would like to review some of the spiritual solutions that we all can address in relation to such injustices. In other words, how to turn those injustices into justice. And I combine these solutions specifically with the spiritual teachings found in the Baha'i faith. And I hope that by the end of this presentation, we will have a better understanding of the complex nature of this topic and the role and responsibility that each of us has, but also the role and responsibilities that various structures in our society has in tackling this very difficult problem. Embedded in this talk, of course, is the whole notion of how peace is not possible until the current structures and systems are transformed so that we get rid of systemic racism and that we get rid of environmental injustice. So the concept of peace really is critical, but there are barriers to peace that must be removed. And I will, hopefully by the end of this presentation, I will have made my case.
Peel and cut up a...
So let me begin by reading a short passage from the Baha'i writings regarding the relationship that we human beings have to nature. And my hope is that you keep this passage in mind as I go through this presentation, because it really is the crux of the matter of the problem when it comes to race, environmental justice, and peace. And I'm going to read it slowly. We cannot segregate the human heart from the environment outside us and say that once one of these is reformed, everything will be improved. Man or woman is organic with the world. His or her inner life molds the environment and is itself deeply affected by it. The one acts upon the other, and every abiding change in the life of humanity is the result of one of these mutual reactions. So several major points stand out as I read this quote, and I want to just explain at least my perspective on it. First of all, the focus is on the human heart, which is really interesting. And that the human heart is really connected to the environment. I don't know how often we look at the environment and its connection to the human heart, but this is what this specific passage is telling us to do. That really the human heart is very much organically involved with how nature and the environment is tended to, is preserved, and is taken care of. Now, the human heart can mirror both light and darkness, love and hate, goodness and evil. In the Baha'i teachings, there is a warning about the evil side of the human heart, which we are asked to guard against in human relationships. We are asked to do everything in our power to, and I want to read from the Baha'i writings, to do everything in our power to, and here's the quote, to guard against the insistent self, the evil promptings of the human heart. So insistent self, when I only insist on my way and don't listen to anyone else's way, that's the insistent self. And that's really the dark part of human nature, which is not helpful. The Baha'i teachings tell us that the human heart resembles a mirror. When this mirror is purified by spiritual attributes and qualities, then human hearts are attuned and reflect one another. And as a result, spiritual emotions are generated. So again, I'm focusing on this quote about the human heart and the environment because it indicates that each of us has to develop our inner self first with spiritual qualities before we go out into the world and try to influence and change what's in the world that does not reflect the best in all of us. And in the Baha'i writings, it says, the love of God and spiritual attraction cleanse and purify the human heart and dress and adorn it with the spotless garment of holiness. So what we're talking about is both the sacredness and dignity of every human being, but also the sacredness and importance of our environment, including nature. So if we want to create an environment that promotes racial justice, the well-being of all people, that brings about unity among people, then we must begin by purifying our own heart. And purifying our own heart leads to outward transformation and refinement of our surroundings, both our material surroundings and our natural world. I think wherever we live, the places in which we spend our days with family, friends, neighbors, in our workplace, these are places in which we have the power to create an atmosphere of love, friendship, community, beauty, and solidarity. An atmosphere that over time and with great effort and action on each of our parts leads to social change that is positive and that will ultimately eradicate racism and bring justice to all, and then a peaceful society. When we're attracted to each other in fellowship, in community, when we show each other kindness, when we show each other a sense of camaraderie and working together, we also reflect a sense of peace in all that we do. So there's an interrelationship between all these three areas: racial justice, environmental justice, and peace. And of course, the opposite is true. When our hearts are defiled, when we promote divisiveness between each other, when we give off sentiments of hatred and hostility, then both our relationships with others and with nature, with our environment, is defiled and unfortunately made as not a very pleasant place to be in. I think what's important about this relationship of the human heart with the environment is that we humans are the only ones on this planet who have the capacity, but also the responsibility to ensure that society and nature are preserved, protected, and passed on to future generations. The plants, the minerals, the animals, and of course the human beings. These are all extremely important to the planet on which we live. But it's the human element, it's the influence of human beings that can make the difference in relation to, will we have a healthy, just environment, or will we defile it, as we're experiencing right now with some of the major changes that are taking place in our environment. So I think, again, the responsibility falls on human beings to protect. They are the trustees of not only humanity, but also of the environment or nature. It's almost like each of us has to become this very grand, beautiful gardener who gardens every day the environment in which we live. Concern for the environment and the safeguarding of all living things in that environment is also a very unique ethical or spiritual responsibility. We have all the science and scientific knowledge, I feel, that we need regarding the environment. We have fantastic scientific experiments and research being done on the environment. What we are lacking is this ethical, spiritual reaction and responsibility to how to deal with this environment, which is so important to our lives. So in this regard, we truly are the trustees of the environment, but we have to make sure that we are spiritual and ethical trustees. So the relationship between racial justice, environmental justice, and peace is critical to our developing a healthy world for all the peoples of the world, especially the marginalized people. The topic of this presentation focuses our thoughts on these three areas: racial justice, environmental justice, and peace, which shows us that if we are to really bring about a peaceful world, then we need to deal with the racial justice and the environmental justice. And I'm going to get to that in just a second. But I want to just remind you that our quote, the first quote I read said that it states that our inner life molds the environment, just a reminder, and is itself also deeply affected by it. So how many times do we walk into a beautiful part of nature and we're just overwhelmed by the beauty that it presents? It really touches us in ways that we can almost not explain that beauty because it's so overwhelming. In the same way, we walk into a room of a group of people, and depending on the environment that that group of individuals has created, we also feel this awe and this wonderful welcoming environment among these individuals. And I think this is something that I'd like to really spend a little time on tonight, which is that each of us, through our inner lives and our inner spirit, can make a difference. When we meet any individual, when we greet any individual, and when we invite people to be a part of our social circle. And in the same way, we must learn to treat the environment as if something sacred has been given to us. But this, of course, is not happening in the world today. The Baha'i teachings tell us that all of humanity suffers when any one group thinks of its own well-being in isolation from that of its neighbors. So this is the problem. If any one group thinks that its own well-being is more important than its neighbors, we're automatically already in trouble. Or if any one group pursues economic gain without regard for how the natural environment, which provides sustenance for all, is affected. So these are clearly two very dangerous situations, right? And they impact both the well-being of human beings and also the well-being of the environment. What it takes to deal with our problem of racism and the degradation of the environment is really what the Baha'i teachings, what really Baha'u'llah, the prophet founder of the Baha'i faith, tells us, which is we need to become mature human beings. We need to grow up, if you will, and become wise. Because if we don't, the scourge of racism, the problem of environmental degradation will really bring terrible things our way, as it already has. And I think this is why spiritual education is so important. So let me define environmental racism. It refers to the unequal access to clean environment and basic environmental resources based on race. Communities of color are disproportionately victimized by environmental hazards and are far more likely to live in areas with heavy pollution. People of color are more likely to die of environmental causes. More than half of the people who live close to hazardous waste are people of color. So that's the racial description of environmental injustice. Now, what is environmental justice? It is defined as the fair treatment, environmental justice, okay? Fair treatment and meaningful involvement of all people with respect to the development, implementation, and enforcement of environmental laws, regulations, and policies. By all people, we mean all people, regardless of race, ethnicity, nationality, or sex, gender, culture, income, educational level. All people should receive fair treatment and meaningful involvement with respect to environmental laws, regulations, and policy. But let me put out some statistics about where we are in this country today in relation to environmental justice. Annually, the United States oil and gas industry releases about 9 million tons of methane gas and other toxic chemicals into the atmosphere. African Americans and low-income communities are disproportionately affected by air pollution in this country. For example, more than 1 million African Americans live within a half-mile of natural gas facilities, and over 1 million African Americans face a cancer risk above EPA's level of concern due to unclear air, and more than 6.7 million African Americans live in 91 US counties with oil refineries. Now, I don't want to repeat these statistics. My point is that there is a huge disparity here, and we have to be aware of this, because oftentimes we are not, unless we really dig deeper and read more important, read beyond just the headlines, read more vigorously about this problem. In total, African Americans are 75% more likely than white people to live in fence line communities. Fence line communities are areas near commercial facilities that produce noise, odor, traffic, or emissions that directly affect the population. And one last thing, exposure to poor air quality can, of course, cause numerous health problems, such as asthma. In the US, approximately 13.4% of African American children suffer from asthma, as compared to 7.3% of white children. Almost half is the difference. Now, I can give you examples that in a rich neighborhood in Los Angeles called Porter Ranch, there was an episode where there was a methane leak, and immediately they basically came to the aid of that white neighborhood, and a state of emergency was declared, and homes were evacuated, and basically everything came back to normal pretty quickly. In the same city, Los Angeles, Jefferson Park, a neighborhood in South Los Angeles, located near the oil drilling sites that contains pollution, where over 90% of African Americans or Latinx live, there was also a problem, a leak, but the company didn't do anything about it until great measures had to be taken to bring it to the attention of officials in the city, and to bring it to the attention of the gas company to do something about it. And so it took literally from 2010, when this episode happened, to 2013, 3 years before anything was done about it. Again, I present these statistics not because I want to drill this into us, but because the reality of the situation about the injustices of the environment are just so evident and clear for all of us to notice. But to drive this home a little bit more, if I may, I'd like to show 2 short videos that will give you a better picture about environmental justice. The first one is looking at it from a global perspective. The second one I want to bring to your attention, and I'll tell you why. It's a preview for a Netflix documentary that was actually put together by some people in the DC area regarding environmental justice. So let's first look at these videos, and then we'll discuss them.
No one can escape the climate crisis. It will, whether we choose to accept it or not, affect every single one of us. But climate change and its impacts are anything but equal. In fact, the cruel reality is that those who are the least responsible are already suffering the consequences. But how has this injustice come about? And how do we address it so that as climate change continues to worsen, we all stand a chance of weathering the storm? The world is a pretty overwhelming place right now.
A global pandemic,
increased social inequality,
political polarization, and that ever-present thorn in our side, climate change.
Climate change, extreme weather, levels are rising. Biodiversity is reportedly declining, have left the world in a climate emergency.
In this series, we'll explore how we got here, where we're headed, and what we can do to make a difference. This is The Breakdown. In the game of economic progress, some of us haven't been playing fair. A small elite have been stealing from the bank while the other players aren't looking. And they've rigged the deck so that they pull all the good cards. Their tactics have built megacities, industries, airports, shopping centres and penthouses. And as they've marched around the board, scooping up the rewards, the other players have been told to wait their turn. At the heart of climate change is a deep injustice. It is people of colour, women and indigenous communities, the players left behind, who are on the front lines and who are most at risk. To understand the extent of this injustice, it helps to look at these two maps. Look at the red in this one. It shows countries who've created the most carbon emissions, and in other words, contributed the most to climate change. Now look at the other map. Here the red shows countries that are the most vulnerable to the effects of climate change. You can see they're almost directly inverted.
A lot of the success and sort of development of the global north has come at the fate of the global south. We have literally dug up resources, exploited those communities to build ourselves kingdoms in the north. And that has contributed to climate change. And now what we've left the global south with is runaway climate change without the resources to tackle it and without the resources to save their communities.
Our biosphere is being sacrificed so that rich people in countries like mine can live in luxury. It is the sufferings of the many which pay for the luxuries of the few.
So how did we end up with such an unequal society? To scratch the surface of this complicated issue, we have to look at the past, the present, and the future.
So in the past, you can't get the climate crisis without the Industrial Revolution. You can't get the Industrial Revolution without oil and gas. You can't get oil and gas without colonialism and slavery.
That's a lot to take in. To summarize, colonialism provided access to countries where oil and gas were present. Slavery helped finance the Industrial Revolution, which in turn contributed to creating the climate crisis. Sadly, we can't yet consign these injustices to the dustbin of history, because, well, they're still being played out today.
In the present, you see it in terms of where oil and gas infrastructure is sited, and is sited in Black and brown communities and indigenous communities. Climate injustice is placing pipelines underneath Black schools, placing pipelines through the heart of unceded Native American indigenous territories.
So the past is riddled with systemic injustices, and the present isn't looking too good either. But what about the future?
Climate change is often thought of as this great equalizer in terms of it will make all of us suffer the same consequences, but that is just simply not true. Because if you are already living on the margins, if you're already on the edge, and then you bring something in that just destabilizes everybody, you're the first to go.
The truth is that across the equatorial band of the planet in the global south, those nations are already dealing with quite dramatic impacts today, and they're going to get much, much worse in the decades ahead, such that the share of punishing brutal global impacts are almost all concentrated in countries that are the least well prepared to deal with them and have done the least to create the problem.
The climate crisis has triggered what may be the largest migration of humans in our planet's history, and a new term has been added to our dictionaries: climate refugees. The UN projects that there'll be up to 1 billion migrants by the year 2050. It's no coincidence that at the same time, a wave of nationalism is sweeping across the globe as countries who had it good start to close their doors and tighten their borders.
For me, one of the scariest aspects of this whole story is that we will see climate change exacerbating global inequality in a very dramatic way, and see countries that have the capacity to help all around the world instead turning away from the needs of people living elsewhere and focusing on the well-being of their citizens in a sort of nationalistic, narrow-minded way.
If we're to resolve this injustice, we have to address this uncomfortable history, make amends, and commit to creating a fairer future for both people and planet. This is called climate justice, a human-centered approach to tackling climate change whilst addressing the many intersecting social issues that created it.
Climate justice recognizes that climate change is a result of and has emerged from interlocking systems of capitalism, resource extraction, labor exploitation, the commodification of nature, and that the people who are hardest hit are the people who have been least responsible.
As members of the human family, we are standing up together to protect what's sacred.
So what can we do? Well, there are proposed solutions, and one of them is called the Green New Deal, an ambitious plan that aims to tackle climate change whilst addressing social inequalities.
So what the Green New Deal is this plan that tackles climate breakdown while building a society where all of us can live better lives. The Green New Deal will rapidly decarbonize our emissions by modernizing our energy, our transport, our housing, our food systems. It will also create, and actually this is the most important bit, millions of green new jobs in the process.
So there are viable solutions. To deliver climate justice, the environmental policies we create need to encompass human rights, racial justice, and gender equality. We can do this by supporting bold visions and by writing policy in collaboration with those who are the most marginalized, so that no one is left behind.
The choice that we have right now is life or death. And I don't think death is a choice for any of us. If that is off the table, we have to do the hard stuff. Can we imagine a different future for ourselves? Can we imagine things working differently?
By now, it's clear that the effects of our great fossil fuel experiment are deep, multitudinous, and often hard to swallow. Yes, the past and present are littered with injustices, but the future doesn't have to be. Climate justice might be a complex issue, but its aim is simple: for everyone to have access to a livable and healthy environment. Global North or Global South, it is our most basic human right.
From birth, my daddy, he always wanted us to be able to talk to our people. Because you have this type of history, your ancestors are going to always talk to you.
The way my mother told me, Timothy Mayer, a local businessman, made a bet that after slavery was abolished, that he could still bring Africans into the country. He went and brought them back here and burned the ship to conceal the crime.
It's slowly been erased, and as far as I can remember, it's never been in history books.
The Mayer family lied to lead people to the wrong area so they wouldn't find the ship.
How should I say this? I don't want the momentum of the story to just be focused on the ship. It's not all about that ship.
The village that these Africans built, they called African Town.
They created this thriving place, and they've been holding it down and fighting ever since.
But by 2019, Africatown is completely surrounded every direction by some form of heavy industry.
What person want to wake up knowing that they sitting on historic land, but they got to smell the chemicals from a factory?
A lot of influential people involved in all this. I think the Book of Secrets is going to be open.
I don't want our history to be taken the same way our people were taken.
But everybody wants to know something about their ancestors.
History is like a puzzle that fits together.
I don't want to be a part of it. I would like for us to be it.
As a child, I thought the story was sad. Now, I don't get sad no more. Because we still here. My only fear is for my people's story not to be told.
So again, I'm not using these two clips to promote anyone's agenda, but to give you an idea about what we mean when we talk about climate injustice. I highly recommend that you take the time to watch this documentary called Descendant, because it's an excellent case study of what we mean by racial injustice and climate injustice. But I want to just tell you that the scale of this problem and bring in the spiritual issue again. So in about a month ago in the newspapers, you probably saw that there was an article saying that the oil giant company Exxon knew about global heating at least as far back as the 1970s. In fact, they think that it may have even been as far back as the 1950s because they have unearthed some archival research materials that show how accurate the scientists who Exxon hired to predict global warming, how accurate they were back in the 1970s, and how they basically kept this research result quiet. And I say this because here is a company that obviously felt that it's more important to let this problem continue to grow rather than take the ethical measures to deal with the problem. I mean, I think it shows the level of corruption, greed, a lack of leadership. And again, I'm not just picking on Exxon because, you know, they're not the only one, but I think this presents the depth of the problem that we face in this world in relation to these injustices. And really, this is where I would like to begin to now, towards the end of my talk, to talk about how the Baha'i teachings tell us to deal with this problem. Because as I said earlier, getting rid of racial prejudice, bringing about environmental justice, these are not simple problems. These are not simple answers to very deep, complex problems. But what I think is important is for us to visit what our spiritual response, our moral response must be to these problems. And I say this with this particular point that I want to make. I know that it is overwhelming when we see what's happening to our world today. I'm aware of the evil that lurks in this world. I'm not utopian about this at all. I'm very realistic about our problems. But I also believe that if one person can change, many people can change. And I believe that if many people can change, a lot of people can change. And it's with that spirit that I think working on the spiritual, ethical, moral problems of prejudice, racial prejudice, and environmental justice are the best way for us to advance this direction towards justice and towards peace in the world. So the Baha'i teachings tell us that, and I'm going to quote in some cases directly from the Baha'i writings, that freedom from racial prejudice in any of its forms should, at such a time as this, when an increasingly large section of the human race is falling a victim to racism's devastating ferocity, be adopted as the watchword of the entire body of the Baha'is. So again, this is, I started off by saying freedom from racial prejudice, okay? Freedom from racial prejudice. It has to be the watchword of the entire body of the Baha'is. And of course, I would say it has to be the watchword of all of us, whether religious or not. It should be constantly demonstrated in every phase of our activities, whether formally or informally, individually, as well as in our official capacity, in our organized groups. In other words, wherever we are, whatever we do, how can we make sure that racial prejudice does not enter into those spaces? Also, how can we ensure that we reach out and befriend people from different backgrounds, from different perspectives, from different classes, from different neighborhoods? How do we ensure that within our circle of people, we have a representation of humanity and just not people who look like me? In my work, how can I make sure that the people that are hired are of a minority perspective, in particular, African American, Latinx, Native Americans? Again, wherever we are, who are the minorities? How can we make sure that the people who are not often represented, that we do our part to represent them? That becomes a spiritual responsibility which each and every one of us has. It does start in our homes, it does start in our neighborhood, but it also goes to the institutions in which we're a part of. So for the Baha'is, freedom from racial prejudice is something that they attempt to work at. And it's not an easy task to work at because it is a very deeply embedded problem, especially in this country. And it goes back to what I said about when the human heart is dark and is full of evil. It's very difficult to try to change and transform that heart, but only through spiritual means can this happen. Now, I think the other thing that's important from the Baha'i perspective, which ties to these three elements that we're talking about tonight, race, environmental injustice, and then peace. Racism in the Baha'i writings is viewed as one of the major barriers to global peace. Now, that's really profound. That racial prejudice is a barrier to peace. We will never have a world at peace if we continue to promote racial prejudice. In fact, let me read you what the Baha'i writings, or in one of the, I don't want to go into detail, but this is from the Baha'i perspective. Racism, one of the most baneful and persistent evils, is a major barrier to peace. Its practice perpetrates too outrageous a violation of the dignity of human beings to be countenanced under any pretext. Racism retards the unfoldment of the boundless potentialities of its victims, corrupts its perpetrators, and blights human progress. Recognition of the oneness of humankind implemented by appropriate legal measures must be universally upheld if this problem is to be overcome. Now, I think it's interesting that in this country, there are now more legal measures being taken in places that experience racial injustice and also environmental injustice. And this is important. Legal measures are important. But beyond legal measures, we also have to get more people to become educated about the problem of racism and to learn how to take the kinds of actions that will bring social change and eradicate racial prejudice. Now, the other aspect of this problem of racial prejudice and environmental injustice has to do with the inequalities that exist in our country. Some groups, because of a long history of suppression and oppression, have been denied equal access to all opportunities within our society. And again, the Baha'i writings tell us the inordinate disparity between rich and poor, a source of acute suffering, keeps the world, and I would say this country, in a state of instability, virtually on the brink of war. Few societies have dealt effectively with this situation. The solution calls for the combined application of spiritual, moral, and practical approaches. A fresh look at the problem is required. And the fresh look that's required involves consultation with experts from a wide spectrum of disciplines, devoid of economic and ideological polemics, and involving the people directly affected in the decisions that must urgently be made. So what the Baha'is are saying is that to get rid of the inordinate disparity that exists in our society, we do need to see what the experts are telling us. At the Baha'i Chair, we invite all kinds of African-American experts, but others, to come and enlighten us about this problem. That's one thing. That's very important. But when we do this, we don't have an ideological thing in mind. We're not left or right or in the middle. We are interested in the values, human values, and the spiritual solutions. And so what we want to find out from these experts is how can we then go to the people at the level of the grassroots and have those people be directly involved with their own agency in relation to their own community and its development, their own opportunities, their own well-being, rather than imposing something on them. And I think, again, if you watch the Netflix documentary, you will see a glimmer of what that might look like. Because it isn't that the people who are being victims of environmental injustice, that they don't know what the problems are. They know best what the problems are. They know better than anyone what the issues are. And therefore, it's good to have the scientific ideas and understanding, but what is it that that community would like to see happen? And what legal measures, but also spiritual measures can be taken to deal with that? So I think I want to pretty much wind up things. I hope that I've been clear about how in everything we do, especially those of us who represent the white population, I just want to briefly talk about this. I think those who are not, those in the majority, can I put it that way? They need to constantly raise their own consciousness about the problem of racism. They need to constantly remind themselves that here I see an injustice, there I see a disparity, here I see that things are unfair. And then, what can I do about it? I know that there are things that are much, much bigger than us as individuals. But there are things that every single one of us can do within the circles in which, on a daily basis, we live our lives. And I went over some of those a little bit earlier. At work, what can we do? In our neighborhood, what can we do? Who are our friends? Who comes into the living room and sits around the kitchen table with us? It's those actions that truly make a difference. And I think the people in the majority have a responsibility. I'm not suggesting that both sides don't need to collaborate and work together, of course. But I think perhaps there's a bigger responsibility on those who are in the majority. So I want to perhaps bring this to a conclusion by saying what I want to quote from a letter that the international governing body of the Baha'is of the world wrote after Mr. George Floyd was murdered. He was murdered in May of 2020. This letter came out in July 2020. And I quote, "Racism is a profound deviation from the standard of true morality. It deprives a portion of humanity of the opportunity to cultivate and express the full range of their capability and to live a meaningful and flourishing life while blighting the progress of the rest of humankind." This blighting the progress of the rest of humankind, those of us who may not be Black might think that we have it good. But quite frankly, none of us have it good because a segment of our population doesn't have the opportunities and the rights that they ought to have. So the world for any of us will not get better until we get rid of racism, this profound deviation from the standard of true morality. And how do we do that? Because the House of Justice also gives us a little bit of an idea of how to do that. Ultimately, the power to transform the world is affected by love. Love originating from the relationship with the divine, love ablaze among the members of a community, love extended without restriction to every human being. This love, this divine love, is disseminated by enkindled souls through intimate conversations that create new susceptibilities in human hearts. It softens our hearts, opens minds to moral persuasion, changes the mind from prejudice towards non-prejudice, and loosens the hold of biased norms and social systems so that they can gradually take on a new form in keeping with the requirements of humanity's age of maturity. So I think I have spoken enough, but my final words is that each and every one of us can engage in social action to change the scourge of racism and to change and transform this country to become what it can become when everyone in this country has equal rights with everyone else, and that we remember that it is the human heart in which love flourishes and is sent out to everyone else. And this is our spiritual moral obligation. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Dr. Mahmoudi. Of course, you can't hear everyone clapping. It would be horrible. But we got a lot of hand raising and icons happening all around and smiles and folks deep in thought. So what we'd like to do now, friends, give Dr. Mahmoudi a moment if she'd like a little water or something, but also take your questions and comments. So I'm going to ask you to use your Zoom hand. It's not the thumbs up one, it's the actual hand. Okay, and it'll say raise hand. Use that one and it automatically puts you in order. And I'll invite you up. Or if you'd like to put your question in the chat, sometimes folks don't want to speak, but you can certainly put it in the chat. We'll be monitoring that as well. So Quanta Dawn Light, if you could please show yourself, that would absolutely be wonderful. You're up first. There she is. Hi, Quanta.
Hi. Hello. Hi, everybody. I really appreciate your presentation. It's wonderful and very descriptive of the problems. What I wanted to know is, both individually as a community and institutionally, what applicable, actual, and steps that we can all take when we see racism, when we see environmental problems. I think my degree is in environmental studies, and I've been involved in this for 40 years almost. But we talk about it a lot, but I don't really see a collective. For instance, let's say that in our community, a company is doing something horrible in the African American community. I have never experienced us getting together and protesting in ways that are not controversial, of course. So can you give us some guidelines as to, or maybe you may have some ideas, how we can actually do something? Because we've been talking about it for a long time.
Well, I think, and yeah, of course, we have been talking about it for a long time, but I think one of the things that we have to do, as I can't speak for all communities. I'm not one that has a solution for everyone, because I think everyone has their own solution for where they reside. But first of all, I would, for me, I start with me. In my home, what do I do to make sure that I am not abusing things that impact the environment? I mean, it has to do with, if I may, moderation in all things, from diet to the electricity that I use, to the kinds of things that I have to own or not own, you know, my consumerism and things like that. So I think one has to bring oneself to account first in this regard. Secondly, if we live in a neighborhood where there is problems with environmental justice, then I think as a neighborhood, with the will of the people in that neighborhood, we can begin to consider what actions we might be able to take by enlisting assistance from a legal person. I mean, some of us know lawyers. I mean, you are an environmental expert. You know, what can, in consultation, again, can a community do in terms of taking care of some problem that's happening in the neighborhood? I'm not sure about going to another neighborhood and trying to tell them what to do. Do you see? I mean, I think we have to be really careful about that. But certainly within the places where we live, if we see a problem, again, it's not to create a division, you know, to say, oh, those people over there are bad and we're the good ones. It isn't that. It's to model a good social action, if you will, towards getting rid of some problem. And I would say we should all look within our immediate environments where we live to see what that might look like, what that might be.
like to add a couple of things onto that in terms of what people can do, particularly on the environmental side. Look at your investments. If you're wealthy and you have investments, really look into your investments and find out how much is invested in oil and gas. There are now, I forget the name of it, there's an acronym for it, but there are actually investment companies or whatever that are environmentally sustainable. They only invest in environmentally sustainable things. So that's certainly something one can do at the level of the individual. In terms of consumption, there are some wonderful, wonderful, wonderful videos on YouTube, and I think they're by Business Insider, which actually comes out of Canada. But they have a series and they talk about the plastics the fashion industry. And it's one of the most egregious environmental things of consumption. And when you start to realize how much people spend, the footprint of placing an order in the United States, sending it to Nepal for the material, then back to Korea for the label, and another country does the stitching, and then it comes back here. And a lot of our clothing now is made of plastics. Okay, a lot of it's plastic and not recycled plastic. So take a really good look for that. Really inform yourself about this, because giving our clothes, our used clothing to Goodwill, Salvation Army, whatever volunteer place you have, most of that is sent in huge bales over to places in Africa, Southeast Asia, and they go into landfills and they pollute the water. They have to burn them. It's just a whole mess. So our consumption of clothing, do recycling. And by that, I mean thrift stores and so forth. I get the greatest silks at the thrift stores, let me tell you. You can get good quality there. So that's another thing at an individual level people can look into in terms of the environment. Thank you. Now, our next speaker, please tell us your name, because I only see the letter N for your first name. So if you could introduce yourself.
Thank you so much. My name is Nasrin Shir Mohammadi. I live in a city near Seattle, Washington. Yeah.
Hi, Nasrin.
Thank you so much, dear Dr. Mona. Thanks a lot. And thank you for I think Sherlyn sent the email for me. Thanks a lot. Can you please, Dr. Dear Mona, please put your email in the chat or your phone number. I want to talk to you, but because I forgot all English word, I cannot explain in English.
And I should tell you, my Persian is not all that good. I left Iran in 1959 when I was 10 years old. But I will certainly put my
because when I write, I can better explain.
I will put it in the I will put my personal email, Gmail, okay?
Yeah, thank you so much.
All right. It's not under my name, okay? It's called Flat Breeze.
Yeah.
Okay. Okay.
I want to ask about that. Go ahead, Nasrin.
Yeah, thank you. Even as activities, what should I must do to which book I can study to get more knowledge about everything, about the race,
race? Oh, that's a long list. Maybe, Sherlyn, shall I? Can I send something to you? And not now.
Certainly.
And then
certainly.
I'll send a list to.
Absolutely.
Yeah, and then she'll send it to you. Okay. All right.
Yes, absolutely. And we'll share that with everyone, any
Exactly.
resources that you'd like from this evening.
Of course.
If Dr. Mahmoudi is able to provide them, we'll send that to everyone that has registered for this. And on that note, let me just say very briefly that when you register to attend this presentation, you will receive all invitations with the Zoom link to all of our presentations. And you also have access to our YouTube channel where these recordings are. So that's also a great place if you'd like to go and to look at a variety of issues, on the topic of racism. So thank you, Nasrin. Did you have anything else you wanted to ask about?
No, thank you so much. Thank you so much. Thanks a lot.
Okay. Thank you. Thank you. Okay. My glasses aren't good.
I think it's
Shala.
Miss, yeah.
Shala?
Yes, thank you so much for the lovely presentation. It's interesting that you said you left Iran in 1959, so did I. I was a junior youth and I went to India to do my high school. That's interesting. So most probably my Persian is just as good as yours. Over the years, I don't know how many of you were in North America in the 60s and remember the fighting sexism and racism. And so many of us burned our bras and marched and sat in at universities in the 60s. And we thought we had achieved it. At the time, we weren't even thinking of environment. It was not even in our thoughts. We were mostly talking about how can we deal with this sexism and racism that filled our lives and on equality. But, over the years, we have gone back and forth. We've had a degree of success and then we have had backlash. And I think with the environment also, similarly, this has happened. Now, you did mention this, or somebody did, it has to come from me and in my own community. So in our own street, we have decided that we want to have recycling and compose, and if we can, see if we can get to zero garbage. And we are basically concerned with our little community or neighborhood. And it has been interesting because we have got the youth and junior youth and children involved. And in the summer, we clean our parks. We talk about how to recycle. We talk about these things. But what is so interesting that even in our little community, our neighborhoods are so vastly different depending on the income level, whether or not you're a refugee or whether or not you're established person in the community for a few generations you have been here. We have found that because of politics, we have difficulty to get equal rights and opportunity across even a little community of ours. I don't know how you have you been successful with the local and national governments in dealing with this inequality of some, even within you mentioned like California, 2 different neighborhoods. How can we change that even with our own little communities and get some action from the government?
Well, I think, it's, how shall I put this? It's, there's a saying that one heart at a time, you have to, you can't, a neighborhood cannot take on a government, but a neighborhood can begin to influence people to make changes and maybe create that neighborhood as a model for others to consider. Because what it takes ultimately is for every neighborhood, right, everywhere, to begin to take these actions not only to change the heart, because some of the hearts that we change are people in government. You see, I mean, that's really how systemic change comes about, is that it isn't that you go after the government, but you want to have, you want to reach the level where you have enough of a change in the human hearts so that it's a tipping point. So I guess what I'm saying is every single one of us, wherever we are, you're doing some things in your neighborhood, but to get rid of inequalities requires that, as I said, if I'm, and I'll give you a real example, at my work, I hire students to help us out with things. Well, I make sure, and this is starting 10 years ago when the minimum wage wasn't anywhere near this, we pay them well above the minimum wage. I don't want to say how much, but well above the minimum, because we want to be fair. You know, I mean, it begins in those ways. Now, but the Baha'i Chair is a small program, but every program should be doing this. Do you see what I'm saying? That's the way we can get rid of inequalities, is in the ways that, depending on who we are and what we can influence, we can make a difference. I mean, I can go as far as to say it also has to do, you know, when we go to a restaurant or we get a cup of coffee, do we tip that person behind the counter? If we can, you know, are we fair about that? It's in those ways that we have to help each other out.
Thank you. I'd also like to add a little bit to that as well. For those of you who are not Baha'is, we're nonpartisan. We're apolitical, rather. So we take great interest in the affairs of the world, but we don't take sides, I think, as Dr. Mahmoudi has indicated. However, we're also obliged, or I'm sorry, not obliged, but we're also invited and encouraged to vote. Now, there are many, and it depends on where you are, what county, what city, what state, but there are many places where there are local positions that are nonpartisan. Your common council might be one, you know, or something of that nature, where you can start meeting people, attend some of these meetings. That's where many of those people whose hearts need changing are. Get involved in your local community. And there may be some positions, you know, that would be available to you because they're nonpartisan, okay, and for which you could become involved in. So that's another way to become engaged in a neighborhood, in a community. So I'll just throw that out there for general consumption. And that's just my personal interpretation of things. So let me say that. Okay, thank you. Gail, hello, Gail.
Hi.
There you go.
This was so wonderful, and I want to assure you that it's going to take a long time for me to assimilate and digest and come up with the most enlightened responses to the many things you've said that are so provocative. So I'll just tell you my immediate takeaway, which is right here on the surface. And when you said that we have to grow up and become wise, you touch such a deep place. I have long contended that the worst things that are being done on the planet are being done from a child or adolescent mentality. And the number of people who are in charge of stuff and powerful and authoritarian, I believe, are operating as though they're adolescents. And so one of the questions they're asking is, what's in it for me? So tonight I heard an answer, thank you so much, that I hadn't before, which is, if you really want world peace, you know, we've heard protesters carrying signs that say no justice, no peace. I didn't get it before, like I do from what you've said tonight. And maybe we can get someone's attention who's in authority and in their adolescent. First of all, by becoming mature adults ourselves, that's the closest thing to the heart that I can do. And to point out what's in it for you is world peace. Otherwise, it's not available. So thank you.
Thank you, Gail. Thank you.
Thank you. Hi, Rebecca.
Oh, my goodness. Good evening. Thank you for this opportunity. Dr. Mahmoudi, what a fabulous presentation. I just have to start with that. But I would like to speak to, and I do not remember her name, I'm sorry, I think it was the first person who asked a question, who was wondering locally, like, how do we do this? What do we change? And I'm pretty certain she probably knows more about that than I do. But what I can tell people is that each of us has the responsibility to be asking questions. And we need to be asking questions from our mayors, from our supervisors, from our representatives in our states, from the local tribes that might be around us, from members in other churches, and asking questions. How come? Why is it? Who said? How did that happen? And then we have the responsibility also, after we ask those questions, to take some kind of action, whether it is to nurture those groups, to encourage those groups, to support those groups in their struggle, for them asking the questions. And the film clips that you gave us show us little bits of small rural communities. I think everybody thinks we only live in big cities, and we don't. A lot of us have access to our government. The other place it's really important, I live in Mendocino County in California. We have a huge amount of environmental issues around cannabis growing. We don't take sides. I'm not going to get if it's right or wrong, but I can tell you neighborhoods are involved, governments are involved, and it's a big thing. And the other place that I saw incredible action that I can participate in such a small way, but it is participating, is our county indigenous tribes are starting to really come to the scene with our governments, with California Department of Forestry. And I can encourage CDF to start working with these tribes. I can ask these tribal leaders, what do I need to do to support this event and to support you? And then follow up. There's so many meetings. That's part of it. There's so many meetings in all of this, and it is a long distance run that most of us can't. But pick one thing, just keep asking those questions, and that will take us very far, and support and encourage. And nextdoor.com, not selling it, but you want to know what your neighbors are thinking and feeling, jump on there and just start reading them, or ask. Anyone smell that? What is that yellow stuff that's coming out of that pipe? Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you, Rebecca. Clearly, she's in the thick of it. Ruha, hello.
Hi, Sherilyn. Thank you so much for taking this, my question or my comment question. And
Can
thank
we
you
see
so
your
much.
face today?
I'm sorry, I'm traveling and I'm on my cell
Okay.
phone. There's a lot of, so I'm sorry I can't turn the camera on. And thank you very much, Dr. Mahmoudi, for your presentation. I just wanted to add to the part where you spoke about what is the part that we can play. And I agree so very much that it starts with me and what can I do to be more environmentally conscious. But I see that so many people don't go deep enough to really think deeply, really, of the sources of what they're using. And they think that what they're using is good for the environment and so on. But sometimes there is horrific human lives lost in the process or human suffering. And I'm thinking specifically at the moment of the lithium battery and all these EV cars and hybrid cars. And what every single car that I see around me, or my friends so proudly show to me, oh, look, 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 I got my EV car now. All I can see is human lives lost or incredible suffering in the DRC. The mining of the cobalt for these lithium batteries is causing absolute horrific results in the lives of the people, because it has created its own huge political, environmental, tribal, and also warlord problem in the Republic of the Congo, DRC. So I personally, yes, the EV car perhaps is better for the environment, but that is not the solution in my opinion, because it is causing such human suffering. And the DRC so far remote from the first world, the so-called first world, that the Western first world is just so happy about having created this car, and they congratulate each other for having created this, and we're very environmentally conscious, etc. But I find that there is such a deep layer of human suffering behind it. So I'm always trying to speak to anyone who's willing to listen to me. Really think, as Rebecca prior to me said, ask questions deep down to your soul, and do the research yourself too, to see whether this also environmentally and humanly is not costing lives. So I just was wondering if you had any comments on that, Dr. Mahmoudi. Thank you.
Actually, I do, and I appreciate what you're saying, because I understand with electrical cars, the battery issue is not resolved. I know, and I appreciate your sensitivity to that. I find it interesting, actually, that Ford company, when it first created the automobile, its first automobile was an electric one. And I find this so interesting. What would have happened if they had not shifted to fossil fuels? You know, again, I don't have the answer to that, but this is what I have to say about what you raise. You know, we have a broken world. Therefore, when you talk about the Democratic Republic of the Congo, where many of the minerals that are important to all, you know, to cell phones, to electric cars, etc., come from, among other places, what our overall problem is with all of these issues that you raise is that there is no form of an international body that can justly say, we need to use the resources of this planet wisely and distribute them as equally as we can. You see, until we reach that point where we really look at this world for what it is, a very interdependent small planet of nations who need to have a much more international level of governance, we are not going to solve these problems. And there's not time to go into it, but you know, from the Baha'i perspective, we believe that the leaders of the world will eventually, whether out of utter chaos and crisis or willingly, leaders of the world have to come together and pass laws, legislation, policy that says we countries of this world need to learn how to live as a nation of a community of nations who agree that we need a higher level of governance beyond our national sovereignty in order to deal with these problems. Now, in certain areas, we've already done this. For example, in terms of transportation, you know, when you fly in an airplane, when you take a ship somewhere, whatever it is, or, you know, cargo ships, there's this amazing system of collaboration among all the nations of the world to make this transportation work. When you look at the economic sector, you know, there's a total interconnection in that sector, especially in the digital realm. We need that for how this world is governed. And we citizens cannot do that. It has to be at the level of nations. So that ultimately has to be the solution to these problems. And yes, electric cars should not be a fad per se. We should find ways that we come up with solutions, you know, to fossil fuel usage and this and that. But what do we do with the batteries? How do we recycle those? Are there ways to do it better? Yes, I agree with you.
Mm-hmm. Thank you both very much. Robin, I see you're still here, but you took yourself out, or your video was flashing. Did you still want to ask a question? This is Robin in South Central Colorado, I think. Okay, well, if you change your mind, we're still here. Hey, Lisa. Hi, Lisa Beavers. How are you?
Good, good. I just wanted to share, because I'm so inspired. This talk is at the heart of what our communities down in Florida have been working on, in the collaboration of even county collaboration. The Gainesville community, we are partnering with them, and we have now an interfaith devotional we hold on a monthly basis. We've almost done it for 2 years in a row, on building communities in a changing climate. And it is now partnered with 415 people that want all of the material that we send, the resources that are available to so many people, to show videos, to show devotionals, and have the material to show their families, their communities. And the circles are just crossing over each other from all the different events that we're doing, but we're also, the devotions are really important. And I think half of what the quotes read today, we used in a devotion today, that love is an agent for social change, you know, and we really have to be of service to our community and do the grassroots level. It's the community building that. And the one big thing that I just love is the statement that came from a Baha'i international community. If you wanted something to just really see where our Baha'i perspective is, the One Planet, One Habitation document that has been produced is a Baha'i perspective on recasting humanity's relationship with the natural world. And I just really wanted to share that. And it's exciting because we're using, even the kids are really at the forefront of our efforts. They have even partnered with the elder community, even write a play and putting on a play with a theater that's given their whole theater to make this happen for climate change. So lots of partnering and collaboration between corporations, individuals, and I think the key is the love that you've shown in that aspect. That's how we can change the hearts, the word of God, and makes a difference.
Thank you. Wonderful.
Yeah. Thank you, Lisa. Robin, you're back. Hey, Robin.
I am. I'm sorry. Something came up.
No problem.
I live off the grid, and that's one of the issues with my video. But but the reason I said that is currently because of our well situation. We're using bottled water, and that upsets me a lot.
Yeah.
So, but I have found a company that sells bottles from recycled. And so I put my money into that. And the reason I'm saying that is because whatever we do, we vote with our money. We vote with our money more than we do with our ballot. What we buy tells corporations what we're willing, what we want from them. And so when we're talking about the economics of this and being in a neighborhood or being a single person or family, or we vote with our dollars, what we buy. And Hoda said that earlier, but I just kind of wanted to stick it out there like that's it. With every dollar you spend, you're voting.
Thank you.
Yes, thank you very much, Robin. And I'm so sorry to hear about your water deficit out there. That's, oh, yeah, that's another specific area of environmental crisis that's just, sometimes it's just so overwhelming. All of the various ways in which we're continuing to do harm. Gail, you're back up? Come on back up. Did it sink in a little more?
No, she said something new that prompted some humor.
Okay.
In honor of the late Burt Bacharach, just recently, you know, what the world needs now is love, sweet love, and boats and planes and trains. When you made the reference to that collaboration, maybe we ought to look more friendly on the balloons that are dropping all over us. Maybe that's one of the ways that we're trying to communicate with each other, because it really seems a little humorous. Honestly, you know, since nobody's getting hurt and nobody seems to be doing anything ugly with what they see from their balloon, it's anyway, I loved what you said about the collaboration that was already taking place on those vehicles. So I love the idea of going there on purpose.
Thank you, Gail. Thank you. We also have some information that's come in the chat. Joyce Olinka has informed us that there is now a car in France that runs on compressed air. Isn't that amazing? Yes, 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 absolutely. I think that's so amazing. You know, something that occurred to me as I was, you know, listening to your presentation, and when I think about the root cause of racism, well, there are two actually, but when I think about the material side of it, it's about greed. What's happening in the DRC, that's about greed, not paying human labor what they're worth, and in these horrid working conditions, right? Why would oil companies, as Dr. Mahmoudi mentioned, I think with Exxon, who knew in the 60s or 70s where this was going? If they knew that, then why weren't they thinking, let's come up with some alternatives? Why not? I mean, if I was an oil company today, or 10 years ago, or even 20 years ago, I would have said, you know what? I'm going to start investing a lot of my resources into alternative energy, because oil, regardless, you know, of its climate effect, it's going to fade out eventually. And what comes back to my mind over and over again is greed. That it's greed. It's greed that has helped perpetuate slavery. Because, hey, let's get cheap labor in here for sugar, for cotton, tobacco, batteries, you name it. And so for me, I think one of the core issues and part of that transformation of the human heart is, and this is more of a question really, how do we help people who perpetuate that kind of crass materialism and greed intentionally? They're doing it, you know, they could care less about the environment or anything else. How do you change that heart? You know, how do you become an influence? Yeah, please.
Carolyn, I think that's look, I don't have a perfect answer for that, obviously. I think we can't, quite frankly. I think there are people remember the two sides of the human heart, or human nature, if you will. I mean, we are capable of doing amazingly good, wonderful things. We are capable of risking our lives to save another human life. At the same time, we are willing to do, and I don't need to go into the details, many, many, many horrible, evil things. So we always have this, there's two sides of human nature. Now, from a Baha'i perspective, and I would say from most spiritual perspectives, the way to deal with this is through the teachings, the spiritual teachings. What is right? What is wrong? How do you raise children to understand right from wrong? That you can't harm another human being. You can't harm an animal. You can't even really harm insects without thinking about why you're doing it. You know what I mean? I mean, this really begins to address the whole issue of human nature, if I may say that. And I think we have to go where positivity is. I want to work with people who want to have, who want to impact positively what's happening with the people in the world. I want to work with people who are doing all they can to try to understand how to get rid of the roots of racism, to develop a different system of global governance, to understand human nature better. I want to build my relationships with that group of people. And I don't want to waste my energy, quite frankly, with the ones I have absolutely no influence over. I just, and I don't want to name them, but there are many people in this world who there's no way that any of us can influence them, but they do a great deal of harm. But I think we need to go where the positive is. And in my heart of hearts, I believe this because I think every civilization, if we really study past civilizations, it has always been the common people who've built civilization. It hasn't just been, if you will, the ones with more money or this or that. So I'll leave it at that.
Thank you. I appreciate your thoughts on that. Yeah. I'm just overwhelmed. I won't say overwhelmed, but just becoming really aware of how the use of technology is allowing us as a world to push off and push off and push off the fundamental changes we need to make. So just as a quick example, this evening on the news, that's my dog, this evening on the news, they're talking about 100 million miles out from Earth. They now can create this shield, the geothermal shield, that will filter the sun's rays so we don't overheat as much, right? So we're coming up with all of these, great technical, and we're totally down with science, right? But coming up with all of these great ways to subvert or stall disaster, but not dealing with the fundamental things. Cut out the oil, cut out the coal, right? And so it's at that level that I find myself like, wow.
Sure,
Yeah.
Sherilyn, I agree with you on that. But there's another side that honestly, these are such complex issues that you're raising. So we can try to cut out oil, but we also have to be careful about what those people whose livelihood is oil, what are they going to do? Do you see what I'm saying? That's why it's so complex. So that we have to, in a more just world, those who have to think of these things, how do you go from fossil fuels to something else? What do you do with the human people? What do you do with those people who you're taking? I mean, we see this with coal. You know, I mean, I live next door to West Virginia. I'm in Washington, D.C. You know, I see what has happened, you know, but we are smart enough to know, to come up with some form of an alternative, so we don't just throw away people, because
Oh,
that
yes.
too, as you know, as all of us know, creates a very unhealthy society.
Absolutely.
But you know, these are the dilemmas. These are where, you know, if those in power looked at the ethical issues, every decision would be very
Right.
measured. You know, that's why I keep going back to the ethics and the spiritual.
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely. And I have great faith that green jobs can take care of a lot of that transition, right? You know, it's just, where are we focusing? It's the lack of ethics and morality in our technology, you know, in our technology. But let me leave that there. We have other people who want to have something to say. So thank you for waiting, friends. Can I ask you, Shanla, to wait a moment so that someone who hasn't spoken can go before you? Okay, great, thank you. There's actually two people. Deanna and Gary, hello. Can we see your faces? Oh, there you are, Gary. Okay, there you are. Hi.
I don't know how well
Okay.
this is coming through because I'm traveling, so my internet's not that great. So Dr. Mahmoudi, I really appreciate your focus on what we can do as in our own communities. I really appreciate coming back to that. And I also really appreciate your focus specifically on race first, it seems like to me. And I want to share an experience in where I live. I live next to a city called Peoria, Illinois. Peoria has it has a good success story. It has a coal burning power plant. It sits right on the river. It sits in the black side part of town. And all of the statistics you're talking about with the increase of asthma, all of those things are very measurable in that environment. Well, there's a group of people within the last year that have been able to not only get that plant shut down, but then also get federal funding to have that all of the cleanup done as well, and then put that back into the community. And I just wanted one of the things that was interesting about this, so it's like the folks that did this were, I won't say all white, but predominantly white group of folks. They're in Peoria, but not in that neighborhood. And a couple of months ago, there's a reception to celebrate this accomplishment. It was a huge accomplishment. It was a great thing. And when they had the celebration, it was in this place called Art Inc. It was like an after school. One of the things they did is have an after school program for the kids in that neighborhood. And kind of in the discussion of that time, one of the people who had really spearheaded shutting down that power plant had lamented that it's like, he's like, well, kids today don't seem like they're very involved, or they don't seem like they care about these issues. And Mr. Romaine, one of the guy that's running this Art Inc. program in that neighborhood, he says, he stood up and he had to address it. He's like, well, okay, yeah, the kids in this neighborhood, they're just trying to see tomorrow. They're not worried about my asthma in 10 years. They're worried about tomorrow. And I think it was interesting, though, because now what he didn't say in that, he said, if you had been paying attention to the inequities in this neighborhood, you would already know that, but you're not. and I think that's just one of the things. It is in that example, it's okay to go into a neighborhood and make change in that way if you have that kind of power. But at the same time, hopefully what we can do is then have empathy in that neighborhood and say, okay, well, what do you need to do now? I don't know. It's an interesting story. I just wanted to share that.
Thank you so much for doing that, Gary, because that is a great story. And I'm not suggesting that those who have the capacity to make a change to not go and approach a neighborhood to see how they can help out. But I'm saying it has to be done, with the will of those people as well. And I think this is what you're saying too, is that this group of people approach the local community and to see what they could do to make a difference. Am I right?
Yeah, I wasn't attacking what you're saying. I just thought it was an interesting story to put context to what you were trying to say. Because I think what the reality of that, though, is the immediate needs of that community look different than what the people who came in to make change were. And it's like, and those don't have to be a problem. I mean, you can make those sync up, but it's like, you have to be aware of it. Anyway, thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Very helpful.
Thank you, Gary. Okay, Anne. Hi, Anne.
Hi. I just wanted to say that I think the most hope for mankind and for peace and for improving the world we live in is starting with children and children's classes and every opportunity we can seize to talk to children about justice and fairness and racism and any problems that we have, consciousness raising, making them aware of things. Because children have such energy and enthusiasm. And if we can start pointing them in the right direction and having them want to have careers where they do things of value for all of mankind, rather than thinking about how much money they can make and things like that. So that's really what I wanted to say.
I agree. I couldn't agree more. I couldn't agree more. And that we also need to be careful because children look to adults for models and they're very astute about figuring us out. So yes, I think that's extremely important. Thank you.
Thank you, Anne. Good to hear your voice again. Shanla, thank you for waiting.
No problem, no problem. In our community, environment has got a larger connotations because if you remember, some of you, we had these conferences. And in our area, we have a large number of children's classes, junior youth activities, and ISGP. And we had a conference with children, junior youth, and parents. Majority of the parents are single mothers raising children on their own. Mostly immigrants. They came here either as immigrants or refugees, started on welfare, did some studying, and now are able to work. When we ask them for social action, what do you want to do because we have gatherings with the mothers for social actions, the greatest thing was what they wanted, 5 things. One was equality of men and women. They felt that it does not exist, even though we live in what we call the first world. Then they said education for their children, better educational systems that doesn't have to be paid to be good, would be, And then they said about health, what we are made to eat as a result of advertising. And then they said safety in the neighborhood. They said environment is not enough to clean up the garbage. Safety, so our children can feel safe, our older people can feel safe on the streets. How do we get the guns out of our communities? So it was interesting that they saw environment as more than just the weather and the climate and what we have done with oil and coal and of course, we are now talking about solar system, water system that can run a car and so forth, which hopefully will happen if we could get the government not controlled by the oil companies. So that was
that's very interesting. And I was going to say, but for example, I don't want to get into doom and gloom, but aspects of the environment that are for me very distressing is the problem of food and water security.
Yes.
We are already seeing conflict and even wars around the world based on food and water security. So, again, peace, racial justice, environmental justice, you see there's such a complex, intertwined, interrelated, interconnected issue here. But the overall problem, and with regard to gun safety, and these are very much, if I may say so, they're very much a United States problem. And again, it has to do with the culture of hate that is being promoted, with the culture of violence that is being promoted. So these are aspects of the environment, and all of them contribute to a very unhealthy and a conflict-ridden society.
Yeah. Yeah, that's so very true. It's difficult unless you live in it or have lived in it to really appreciate the trauma of just living in a community or a neighborhood that's faced with violence and drug activity.
Yes.
It's you just cannot imagine it.
No,
You
no.
just cannot imagine it.
You
And
know,
as I like to,
yeah, I'm sorry. I was
no,
Cheryl,
go ahead.
I have to say, so again, I'm sounding, but I can't help it. You know, every time I hear that an African American has been murdered by a police officer, you know, forget all the other stuff that surrounds that ugly scene. Just imagine, or I imagine, if I were an African American, what I would feel knowing that just simply by the way I look, I represent this kind of an action
Target.
in a target and action from another individual. You know, it's the sense of insecurity, the sense of, I mean, Sherilyn, you can explain it better than I can, but I'm just saying one has to really try to, as much as one can, put oneself in the shoes of that person or that community and see, what does that really mean? You know, what does that reflect for those people who have to deal with this on a daily basis? You know, anyway, I think these are issues that we all have to educate ourselves about. And the best way to do it is to talk to the people who understand this better than we do.
And who are willing to talk, and who are willing or able to talk.
Absolutely.
Because, yeah, but, you know, I think it is very important, you know, to hear it, you know, from someone who has experienced it. But if you're kind of new, you know, into this sort of thing,
That's right.
you may think, oh, there's a Black person, you know, or my neighbor's Black, I don't really know him, but I can go ask him. No, you have to have a relationship first.
Absolutely. No. Always a relationship. Always.
Yeah. Yeah, and I say that not to you, but just in general.
No. I absolutely. You can say that to me as well. Why not? Yes.
Yeah. But I do say, when I think about that, and when you think about the trauma of that kind of lifestyle, and it makes me say, well, of course, there's angry Black women everywhere. Why? This is why they're angry. This is what, you know, because of everything they're carrying, their children, the education, the drugs, the job, the transportation, you know, the violence. Is my son going to make it home today? Where's my daughter? You know, I can't afford to send her to gymnastics and she's good. You know, all of these things, you know, that go on day to day, and I'm not making enough money, and I come home smelling like Kentucky Fried Chicken every night because I work and that's where I work, you know, and all of that, just to carry that every single day. So I'm saying this because part of this forum, you know, is part of that education.
Absolutely.
You know, so to just shed a little light on that. So yeah, if you see Black women and they're looking angry or frustrated or uptight or curt, they probably have a good reason to be. Don't take it personally. It's not about you. And no, this is very important in the work that we do, you know, for people to understand this. So I just wanted to share that part about that.
Thank you.
So do we have, yes, thank you. Do we have any other questions or comments? The chat has been opened up. Oh, Debbie Griffin, I see your hand waving down there. How are you?
I'm good. Hi.
Hi.
I was trying to find my raise hand thing. I wasn't going to say anything, but then as the conversation went, I was thinking a lot about a program that I helped do the tech behind that I was on yesterday with a Dene elder Patricia Ann Davis. And the focus on language and how we use language. And English is a trade language. And so it separates us from connection. And in our discussion yesterday, I kept on coming back to, because we were talking about basically a lot of the same things here, right? And I kept on thinking about ego. You know, the ego that everyone has. And then I thought, well, what's the difference? What's the opposite of ego? Humility. You know, and the virtue of humility. And I think something that even people that have been doing this work for a long time, because it's work that we have to be doing all the time. It's dynamic, it's fluid, it changes. As more as we peel back in the anti-racism work, there's another angle that's exposed, right? And so it's not like that checkbox, so I took a workshop or I was a part of this group and I know everything. But, you know, and then applying this concept of language that my elder has been working to her life's work, and we started talking about humility. And, you know, do people really know what humility is? Looking it up, and, you know, we've got our Baha'i teachings on humility, but that can still kind of, you know, does a person really fully comprehend? And in the dictionary, it says freedom from pride or arrogance. Now, humility is one of the 7 sacred teachings of the Anishinaabe people. And it's Dabe de Dendezewan. And the word actually translates into an understanding that we are a sacred part of the creation. That we are connected to everything and we're not above anything else there is. And that word also means compassion. And then with some other people, Bekadezewan, which is a word that's used for humility, and it means calmness, meekness, gentility, and patience. But I was thinking about that, understand what we lack, especially if we're just only one language, right? And we can learn so much from all different languages, but looking at some of these words that, you know, because all those 7 teachings are all based on some of the virtues and everything as well. So I just, you know, if people had really started looking at what is real humility, because as we're going out into the world to help make it a better place, and being in this society's made it very difficult for us to remember that we're part of all creation and we're not above anything, not even the little tiny mosquito. Anyways, I just had to share that because it was very delightful that it all kind of fit into that yesterday. And then as I was listening to discussion, I, you know, because yeah, wanted to share that. And thank you so much, Hoda, for your Dr. Mahmoudi, for your presentation. And Sherilyn, love you. I love everything that you, all your service.
Thank you.
Thank you, Debbie. Thank you.
Thank you, Debbie. Yeah, that was very interesting. You know, the first definition that you gave of that connection to all of nature. And Yeah, that's just really profound, because when you think of yourself in that way, then how can you not be humbled? You know, you look at the mountains, how can you not be humbled? How can you not be humbled by the beauty of the light coming through the trees in the forest? You know, how can you not be humbled? As you know, as Hoda was saying early on, you know, about the experience we have when we allow ourselves to be in nature and really feel it. How can we not, that awe and that humbleness, I think, that goes along with it. So it's so beautiful. Thank you so much for sharing that.
One more addition, sorry for interrupting, is the hurt of one is the hurt of all, right? And with our relatives, you know, because everybody, we are all relatives, you know, and just changing this thinking and that perspective there. Okay, that's it.
Great, great, great. Okay, well, let's see, how are we doing on time? It's almost 9, or is it 9? Or after? It's almost 9.
It's almost 10 here.
Oh, that's right. That's right. I forgot you were an hour ahead. That's right.
It's all right.
So we're going to do last call. Any other comments, thoughts, questions, ideas? It's been a wonderful sharing. Jerry, I see you there.
Yes. I was offline, not offline, but just out of vision because I was fixing my supper and eating my supper. But I did hear some comments about children. And I would just like to remind parents that the education of children does not start with kindergarten or first grade or children's classes. I really would like to encourage parents to do more to instill the virtues into children. And those virtues must include independence, interdependence, cooperation, those kinds of things. Because I really think that if you don't catch children in those first 5 years, sometimes it's too late.
That's right.
I remember how I raised my children in such a way that by the time they got to kindergarten, our lives were easy as far as the relationship between parent and child was concerned, because I had taught them very, very early that there are consequences to behavior. And I taught all of this without anger. And that's probably the hardest part, is that the parent must scold the child, reprimand the child, teach the child, all without anger. Because if you do it with anger, that's all the child really hears. And that's all the child really learns. But I did such things with my children as when my son was, you know, like 8 or 9 years old and didn't do his chores. I waited till he went to sleep. And then I got him up to do his chores. And I did it with love. I'm sorry, Greg, you know, but this has to be done. They didn't do it more than once, you know. I only had to do that once before they got the lesson. I did such things as if they dawdled and missed the school bus. I let them go back to bed. Around noon, they wanted to get up and play, but no, they were too tired. They were too tired to get ready for school on time, so they needed to stay in bed longer and get their rest. And maybe by tomorrow, they'll be able to get the bus on time. That was their responsibility. They got alarm clocks when they went to kindergarten. Getting up was their responsibility.
Very nice. That's excellent. Excellent advice. Thank you.
And
Jerry.
And my children are wonderful. They're all grown up. And I mean, the oldest is 68, you know. The youngest is 51.
Yeah, thank you for sharing.
Yeah, if you haven't done it yet, Jerry, please write the book. Okay.
Oh, honey,
right. I'm serious. I'm serious.
I know, but my 89th birthday comes up in about 3 or 4 days. I don't have the energy. I've always thought about writing, but I just never done it. And I really regret that I didn't.
let me give you a suggestion. Perhaps it will help. And happy birthday on your big 89.
Thank you.
That's wonderful.
Yeah,
You
happy
don't look
birthday.
anything near that. You don't look anything near
No,
that.
I know.
But let me offer this suggestion.
Okay.
Record it. Voice record it.
Yeah, voice
Just record
record.
it as you think about what you did, and you're reflecting, reminiscing with your children.
Yeah.
Just record it.
Yeah,
And
that
get
would be the easy way.
Yeah,
Cody
'cause-
wisdom.
And we have a recording of you tonight, Jerry, as you explained it.
That's right.
Oh, well, great.
That's right. That's
There
right.
you
I'd
go.
love to hear. I'd love to hear more of those. God knows I could have used it with
Oh.
mine. I had no frame of reference.
Yeah.
But thank you so much
Thank
for
you.
sharing that, Jerry.
Thank
Thank you
you,
very
too.
much.
Bye-bye.
Okay, Gail, I guess you're going to get last call, looks like. Go ahead, Gail.
Well, you may want it because I'm gonna conflict with something you said, but first I want to say part of Jerry's story has been written. It's called The Light We Carry by Michelle Obama. And she was required to get up to her own alarm and walk herself to school at age 5, according to what she said about her life. So it's obviously it works well. But I heard what you said about people having evil within them, but I truly don't believe that people are evil as such. And I don't believe that greed is a motivator. It is not deep enough to go, why are you greedy? And my belief is that the people who have the power are desperate and fearful and don't understand the abundance of the world. There is really enough for everyone. But those who act out of the fear, desperate fear that they will lose their power and that there won't be enough for them, is what I contend motivates the greed. And so, those are the people that we still need to reach as mature adults. So thanks.
Gail, I agree. I just want to clarify when I mention evil, for me, the definition of evil is the absence of good. I don't look at it as a force out there that, pre-exists, but as the absence of good. And I guess I'm just referring to, we do as human beings do things to one another that are just really hard to contemplate. And that's really what I was focusing on, but I appreciate your comments. Thank you.
Yeah, and thanks for taking the greed a little bit deeper, because definitely, fear is a very fundamental emotion,
right?
And very much rooted in prejudice, for sure. And as you said it very eloquently, fear of not knowing the abundance, not realizing the abundance that's out there. And yeah, Western society, it's a zero-sum game. The pie's only so small, and you've got to get the bigger piece, and all of this kind of stuff. Has really done us a great deal of harm. But yeah, there's room for fear in there along with greed.
So it's not insurmountable, is my point. You can address those things.
That's true.
Yeah, it's not just greed is out there and there's nothing we can do about it. There's fear beneath it, and there's a lot we can do about it.
Good point. Good point. Berdina, how are you? So good to hear your voice.
Well, it's good to hear yours too, Charlene, and thank you, Dr. Mahmoudi. And, yes, and Gail, who's made a few comments, and somebody, and I don't know if it was Gail or somebody else who mentioned it, and I just felt like I felt moved to close with a quote from the New Testament. But before I say that, I want to acknowledge somebody also kind of alluded to it through the passing of one of the songwriters. What the world needs now is love, sweet love. Just kind of alluded to that. And this is the scripture that came to mind for me to share.
Okay. Berdina, before you share it, since you want to do it for closing, can you hang on just a second so I can do one more last call?
Yes,
See if
ma'am.
there's anyone else? Okay. Anyone else? This is it, folks. Okay, before you go, Berdina, thank you so much, Dr. Mahmoudi, for being here. This has been a wonderful discussion, and I hope that we can do a part 2 at some point, and look more deeply, at some other aspects of this, like what is world peace going to look like? What could that look like, right? So I think would be fascinating for a lot of folks. So thank you so much, and thank you everyone that stayed on and that was here this evening. Your suggestions and questions were really educational and informative, I think, for all of us. So this has just been a great evening. Thank you all very, very much for coming. Okay, Nason and Jillian are visible. That's always a sign it's time to go because they zoom us out. So Berdina, you've got the last word, and thank you for picking something out of the New Testament for us. Please go right ahead.
It's something I recently memorized, so it jumped out and wanted to be said.
Okay.
All right, 1 John chapter 4, verse 18. There is no fear in love.
Oh,
love casteth out fear. And mature, and it goes on about maturing, but I think you get it. 1 John 4:18.
Wow, if you didn't just sum up the evening. I mean, good grief, that was so inspired, Berdina.
Well, the Holy Scriptures are inspired, so I
Yes,
was able
indeed.
to be a deliverer. So I'm grateful because I have had a crash course in humility for the last year and a half, and we won't go into all the details, but I'm still hanging in the bed and just learning patience and swimming in the ocean of God's word. O son of man, my calamity is my providence. Outwardly it's fire and vengeance. Inwardly it's light and mercy. Hasten thereunto. This is my command unto thee. Well, the hasten thereunto, that thou might become eternal light, immortal spirit. This is my command unto thee, dost thou observe it. So that's how I, right when I got home after my first year and a half ago, when I fractured my vertebra in my back, and it was a horrible experience. But anyway, I've been swimming in the mystery of in the depths of the ocean, the Word of God, including the New Testament. Thank you for letting me share.
Thank you.
Yeah, I
Thank
can go at the mouth I got to keep the jaw down now. But thank you very much.
Oh, you're the perfect ending to a perfect evening. Thank you, truly. Those were just, wow. I can't wait to play this back because I want to hear this again, what you shared with us.
Yeah, you can look up 1 John 4:18 and get more inspiration. Allow up, for those who don't know what that means. It means God is all glorious. So we don't have it, but God's got this.
You're so right about that too. Boy, we're getting wisdom all over from Berdina tonight, aren't we? Oh gosh, so good to have you in this space again, Berdina. And I'm glad you're on the mend. I'm sorry it's been such a long process, but obviously it's paying off for you in other more important ways, I'm sure.
Yes, thank you. And I want to say thank you to Regina too for sending me the invitation.
Okay.
And it was a great pleasure to talk to you as well. And the only way you learn patience, you wait. And that's just God's got it perfectly worked out. And you can't be thankful in adversity unless you've had a dose of it. Well, of course, you probably have, but this is the first time in my life I have this kind of a dose of adversity. So I can learn to practice being grateful in adversity. And
Yes.
so I can't do, so I'm being, James 1, verse 2, 3, and 4 is also a good one for tonight. It says, consider it all a great joy when you experience trials and difficulties for the maturing of your spirit.
Mm-hmm.
So when people ask me how I'm doing, I'm saying I'm having a boatload of James 1, 2, 3. And they all know. That's why I can get a laugh and still not give them all my woes and still tell the truth.
Right.
I love you,
right.
Sherilyn, and thank you, Dr. Hoda.
My pleasure.
Yes.
Thank you so
And-
much, Berdina, for your wisdom.
Well, I'm just the carrier pigeon for the word of God. Thank you. You're welcome.
Stay safe, Berdina. Thank you so much, friends. Okay, I guess that's going to take us out. I hate to leave. You know, I don't see any of you guys rushing to leave either. You know, we do like to hang on, but we should go.
You mentioned Sharon Nesbitt Davis.
Yes. Mm-hmm.
I served Sharon and George and Ron and I served on the LSA of Rockford, Illinois. And I don't see, so she just organized it and didn't show up.
Sometimes that's the case. You know, she and George are extremely busy. They do so much, you know, there at Wilmette. So yeah. But I'm sure she'll get to watch the recording and, you know, let her know you spoke for her. Yeah, spoke for her. Okay, Nason, Jillian, take us out. Good night, friends. Thank you so much for coming. Goodbye.
Love you all.